It's Quinn Eben. I'm a freshman at Georgetown studying history.
Congratulations.
My question for you is, why did you vote for the Keystone Pipeline?
As fossil fuel jobs are replaced by environmentally sustainable jobs, as president, how do you plan to make sure that these workers are trained to compete in a new, greener industry?
Recently, the International Organization for Migration has projected that between 25 million and 1.5 billion people will have to leave their homes by 2050 due to climate change. People from the poorest and smallest nations will likely be forced to migrate first. As the United States is leading the world in carbon emissions, what role do you believe the United States must play in regards to these inevitable climate migrants?
Great question.
It is a great question.
Minority and low-income neighborhoods and communities in transition are disproportionately targeted by industries that follow the path of least resistance when deciding where to locate hazardous waste sites and other polluting facilities. How will you regulate these corporate actions in order to fight environmental, racial, and socioeconomic injustice?
What measures would you take not only to reduce CO2 emissions, but to assist day-to-day outdoor and indoor workers from these heat illnesses?
We are back here in Georgetown University. I'm joined by a bunch of the students. We had a forum this morning. We had a whole bunch of candidates talking. We got to talk to them for about 30 minutes, my colleague Ali Velshi and I, and then these students asked, as you can see from that clip, a bunch of incredible questions. I just wanted to check in with them and see what they thought. You were at the forum?
Yes.
Anyone particularly strong to you today? Is anyone that sort of you felt stood out?
I have to say Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's clear that everyone's passionate about climate change. Thank you. But it has to be Bernie Sanders who is the most passionate out of all. But I still keep asking, who has the actual policy changes that are realistic, that will bring the change? Even if it's radical, it has to be realistic.
But do you worry about, I mean, how much do you think about the political constraints, which I think a lot of people get obsessed with, including myself, understandably, but how much do you think about when you're hearing, whether it's Bernie Sanders or others, do you think like, oh, well, is Mitch McConnell going to go for that and we'll be able to get the votes for that?
I actually do think about it. It's just, we have to be realistic about it. We want to bring the climate changes as soon as possible. And U.S. being a global superpower, it's U.S. that's going to make the changes. Yes. But the problem is, bipartisan politics is difficult, and we have to be realistic about which policies will pass.
You were also at the forum today?
I was.
Was there a policy or an answer that was given today that stuck out to you particularly?
I would say more of like Bernie Sanders was very much hard on climate change, which I think is good, but I believe Julian Castro really stood out because he was one of the people who mentioned about environmental racism. This is affecting people of color more than anything else, and I think that a lot of people tend to be Republicans, tend to forget that, and they leave us out of the narrative. People usually don't listen to low-income people, like people of color, so I think that emphasizing that this is affecting us, no one's going to really care until it starts hitting them.
How old are you? Can I tell you?
I'm 21. I just turned 21.
So you're going to vote?
Huh? Pardon?
You're going to vote?
Of course.
Are you going to vote in the primary?
I am going to vote in the primary.
Do you have are you an undecided voter, or you have a candidate that you're looking at?
I am. I'm stuck between Elizabeth Warren and Castro, so let me see what happens with both.
All right. Thanks a lot. How about you? You were there today?
Yes. Yep.
What do you think about the gap that we kept sort of coming back to between what has to be done and what our politics can do?
I think what was said a moment ago that, you know, even if something is radical, we have to take the change that is, even if it isn't immediately seeming politically feasible, we need to take the biggest steps that we can immediately to try and change this world before things fall apart. So, major issues like the major issues that come from climate change, like mass migration, people having to lose their homes, with just the way that our world is going to change and future generations being impacted in a way that we can't imagine. Radical is right now.
So you want to see pushing big ideas. You want to see them going out past the sort of frontiers and what might be possible, and then if they have to compromise, that's all right.
Definitely, yes.
How much do you, like, in your inner psychological life, worry about climate change? I mean this seriously. Like, how is it a source of anxiety for you?
I would say so. I mean, you think about things like down the road, 25, 50 years from now, when you're growing up or when you're getting older and you have a family, when you have kids, and you start to wonder, will my kids have a planet? Will my kids have the same? We imagine they won't have the same world that we do, and it's really up to like our current leaders to pick up where the past has dropped off and run with the ball, right? Like we need to take action now because of that enormous anxiety that is resting, and I can imagine a lot of in our heads at this time. So I'd say it's a big worry.
Thanks. It's really well done. I'm going to ask you that same question. You were at the forum today, right?
Yes, I was.
How much do you follow this issue? How much do you think about it? How much does it occupy mental space for you?
It completely occupies my thoughts. I'm here at Georgetown to study climate policy. I'm at the School of Foreign Service because the U.S. needs to be a leader and work with countries all over to address this issue.
What did you think of the discussion today about the international dimensions? Because we kept coming back to that. Obviously, it's an enormous part of it. The U.S. is about 20% of emissions at this point. Were there ideas there you liked, ideas you didn't like, things that stuck out?
I did appreciate there was the international discussion, especially because climate change is a national security issue. We saw that especially from Julian Castro looking at climate refugees. But I think plans are great. We need to know if they're going to make this a commitment. Will this be their top priority? Will they use their political capital in their first year to enact comprehensive climate change? And how will they do that if it's a divided Congress? It really comes down if they can make it happen.
Do you feel, we were pushing everyone on, is it a top priority? And some people said yes, and some people kind of wavered. Did anyone convince you clearly that, yes, this will be the first issue, this is the first piece of legislation they're going to move, this is the first thing they think about when they wake up in the morning?
I think Senator Sanders did, but I also want to acknowledge that Senator Bennett had some really great thoughts on how to reform our democracy with gerrymandering and filibuster, and that it's all going to be necessary to make this happen.
All right, very quickly, you're wearing a Pete shirt, but did anyone impress you today?
Senator Sanders talked about climate justice today. I think this is a generational thing. We are the students who, when we're adults, climate change will be hitting hardest. So that's why I am most looking forward to seeing Mayor Pete tomorrow and talking about winning the next era for us to have to deal with climate change in the future.
Well, that does a very good job of setting up my tease for tomorrow. So so well done, everybody. Give these folks a round of applause. So that does it for us tonight, live from the campus of Georgetown University. But we're not done. We have much more tomorrow night in part 2 of our special on the climate crisis. We're going to have reporters that are stationed around the world covering everything from how climate change is affecting migration from Guatemala to the melting landscapes of Greenland, rising sea levels, to the massive flooding of the Mississippi, to the disappearing namesakes of Glacier National Park, to the utterly insane situation with California's emissions standards and the president. And of course, we'll have the highlights from day 2 of our 2020 candidate forum. The full forum will be streaming live on NBC News Now starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thanks so much to everyone who joined us here tonight at Georgetown. We really appreciate it. That is all in for this evening. The 11th hour with Brian Williams starts right now.
Tonight, a second explosion in the story of the whistleblower inside the intelligence community who reportedly witnessed the president engage in something troubling enough to tell people about it. Tonight's reporting is it was a phone call Donald Trump made to Ukraine. In a moment, we'll hear from a reporter who broke the story in the Washington Post and the former head of the CIA, and we'll get the latest from the Trump White House. Plus, the issue that has the power to sneak in and change the course of a presidential campaign. And we know that because we've seen it happen before. The 11th hour on a Thursday night, just getting underway now.